that thing that the blue pill does, is it turns the exception into the norm, and to try to blow up this idea that men are horrible. And that is the feminist game plan for 100 years. That has been, as long as feminism has been a thing, that has been the game plan, to try to say that men are horrible and to take every isolated incidence of men being horrible and blow it into the norm.
Hello and welcome to Monogamish. Today, I'm presenting a series of 2 reactions that I had from the latest interview with Darlene Lev and Jenny Holland. If you haven't seen it yet, you should check out that video called Inside the Manosphere with Women. There are 2 primary questions that I think are very relevant that came up from that discussion. Of particular note, there is a subtext, I believe, that has developed in the manosphere about the perspectives of the newly entered women that are now commenting prolifically inside the manosphere. This subtext, I think, that comes out in this interview with Darlene and Jenny is what has brought up these 2 topics that I think are very relevant to address. First, on a trip to Seattle, I tackled the question, is it true that men and women share 50-50 equal responsibility for the current relationship crisis we are all in that I call the monogamish era relationship system? And second, on a trip up to Stevens Pass, I tackle the question that the girls brought up, why do men need PUA? PUA, of course, being strategies and tactics developed by pickup artists for men to get with women. I hope you enjoy this discussion, as I do think these 2 questions present a stimulating debate. Like and subscribe and comment, and let me know in the comments what you think. I debated whether to release this reaction series or not, and I talked to several friends who requested it and emphatically told me this is what they want to hear. So here you have it.
So I'm sitting in traffic in Seattle, and I thought of another thing that's been on my mind that came up after this interview inside the Manosphere. It's kind of funny how you have a conversation once in a while, not all the time, but you'll have a conversation with somebody and it stimulates your thinking about certain things that you wouldn't otherwise think about. And that's why I think there's a lot of value to talking to these women, especially about red pill topics. And these red pill women, they bring up a different perspective, and some of it right, some of it wrong. But, I'm a big fan of iron sharpens iron. That's a masculine concept. We can utilize that to a certain extent with some of these women too. Got this bus trying to get in front of me, getting mad at me. Everybody gets so mad in traffic. I guess nobody likes to be in traffic. That's not fun, but we got it everywhere. It's a part of life. Speaking of traffic, Tom Leykis, this traffic right here, I-5, south to Seattle. I'm in the north end. Up and down, every day. That's where talk radio and cell phones came together to create the early stages of the podsphere. Think about that, the podsphere. What later became podcast was talk radio before that, for those of you Gen Zers. It's the same thing, just better in the podcast era, I think. More options. And then we had video cast, podcasts. We don't know what it is anymore. But the thing that came up for me that I've been thinking about is Jenny had mentioned, and I'm not getting on Jenny, I just, something that made me think. She kept mentioning a couple times there this idea, well, I'm a big believer in 50-50. And specifically, we were talking about the woman side of things, and she interjected a point about, well, there's a lot of bad men out there too, and there's a lot of men that just had kids and left them and so on. That in particular, that's the one thing that really bothers me, because it's not true. It's just not true. And I believe that this is a blue-pilled narrative that it's been getting pumped for a long time. This is the narrative that they want to pump. Any kind of pushback against feminism, and it's, but horrible men. And the reason that I say that it's not true is because what we're actually talking about here is a matter of scale. Scale matters, as they say, size matters. And the scale that we're talking about is, between the women and between the men, and in relationships, in modern relationships, who is causing the Trump, what I call the real Trump? Is it the men or is it the women? Are they 50-50 or both? Now, here's what I want to challenge you to think about. There's nothing making it 50-50. Okay, we talked about this in a previous video, Who Drew First Blood. This idea, it takes two to tango. That's not actually true. It only takes one to wreck it. It only takes one. And who is that one that is doing it more in the current age? We're talking, and I'm specifically talking about from 1960 until today. Who is that one between the men and the women in relationships in the West, in our little time in the universe? Who is that one? And the most common statistic that we cite is the 70%, which is a little bit off, I believe, but it's a fairly well established fact. 70% of divorces are being instigated by women. Like I say, I don't agree with that. I think it's much worse than that. I think it's closer to 100. But I'm not going to say 100. There's always exceptions. And of course there's always exceptions with men who are doing bad, right? In this show, inside the Manosphere that we were talking about, that was kind of one of the points, is that this guy, Louis Theroux, he's focusing on these exceptions. It's these exceptions that are really getting the, publicity that they're the norm, right? And that's the problem with the show, is it does that thing that the blue pill does, is it turns the exception into the norm. and to try to blow up this idea that men are horrible. And that is the feminist game plan for 100 years. That has been, as long as feminism has been a thing, that has been the game plan, to try to say that men are horrible and to take every isolated incidents of men being horrible and blow it into the norm. Okay, and so that's why that comment bothered me so much, because look at the tattoos. If you want to, gauge something, look at the tattoos. Look at how many of the women are getting the tattoos. What percentage of women, especially as they get younger, but now, I mean, it's pretty common from Gen X all the way down to the youngest ages. The tattoos are just prolific with the women. I mean, prolific. And we see these trends of, a group of them do it, and then it becomes the norm. That's what happened with divorce. Divorce became a trend, and it continues to be a trend. And where do you see this with the men, though? That's the question. Are the men doing equally that? Are the men equally destroying the? I don't see that, and that's why that bothers me so much. I know men, I know women, I know thousands. I'm a part of a big community. I know thousands of people, and I've been talking to men. I've been deep inside the manosphere for most of my life, like we said in the video. And, I just don't, I don't see it. I don't see these men, they say these deadbeat dads. This is a big point of the manosphere, is that the deadbeat dads aren't really deadbeat dads. That's not really true. That's what they're trying to blame everything on. And it's not these guys. And, the guys that I know, the guys that I see everywhere are guys that want to be a good father to their children. They try, and they fight, and they pay thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. They go to jail. They do everything that they can to make, this is what men do, to make their family work. And they just get destroyed for doing it. This is the good guys finish last thing. And most guys are good guys. And so, like I said, I'm not trying to hate on Jenny. I just think that from her perspective, she and coming from the Democrat blue pill side of things, feminist most of her life, this is typical. And we all have this problem. So don't you guys go pile up on these women that are trying to be honest and talk about, what they're seeing with things, just because they got one little fact wrong. It's important that I point it out, but, and that we look at it and say, well, is it actually that the case, or is it actually not? It's important that we get to the truth of it for their sake too. But you guys are all simps at one time or another. You guys are all cucked at one time or another. So don't tell me that you haven't had blue pill ideas. We all have. We're coming out of that, and wisdom is the knowledge of truth as we get older, and we wiser and learn the discernment of these kind of facts. And that's just something. One last thing I really wanted to point out. I think it's a very important fact that we need to really push back on in the manosphere, the red pill space, period. This idea that, there's just as many bad men out there. I'm not seeing evidence of that. Prove it to me. I'm really not seeing evidence of that. The men, for the most part, are really trying to make it work, and they're getting wrecked in the process. In spite, and that's, you know, what my book is about how this power balance shift has resulted in the men not having the power anymore to be able to. That's what men do, and the blue pill system is calling that these are narcissists, right? Because they want to control. They're controlling those bastards. They're controlling. They're trying to control their women and their kids. And let me tell you something about controlling. I just was talking to my well, I'll leave him out of it, but a friend, and he was telling me about you know, the ongoing saga of his daughter that is just completely out of control since day one, because the mother refuses to allow any discipline, the binky, and he was just telling me, yeah, he's been over there for like 45 minutes. The kid is just terrorizing the house, tearing things up, screaming, breaking stuff, just being just a little. And that's because of a lack of control. That's because that order, that discipline, the boundaries. This is a blue pill. You know, they love talk about their boundaries. Yeah, when they can use that as an excuse to evade, you know, consequences and fair treatment. But the real boundaries are the boundaries that men create. And that is their nature. It's called order. That's what order is. Order is those boundaries. So these aren't narcissists. These aren't controlling. These are guys that are trying to save their families, only to be wrecked in the process. And the guys who remain, who aren't completely eliminated as fathers, who are, you know, oh, there's still some fathers out there. Yeah, I don't think so. Those guys are neutered men. The ones who stand up get their head chopped off. That's a strong message. Good. That's what we need, is strong messages. So I'm almost to my exit here in Seattle, and thank you for following me, for subscribing. There's a lot more to come. We're just getting started. I'll see you soon. God bless. Hello. I am once again cruising up the state-sponsored highway of death in the afternoon commute here. It is 4 o'clock my time. Beautiful spring. We have fresh snow again this week. We got about 20 inches in the mountains. I can see it up there. There'll be pictures. It's all white up on top of the mountains where I'm heading. I was thinking, you know, I'm getting out late, but, you know, any day in the mountains is a good day. That's just been my experience for the most part. And it's sunny and the weather's looking up. I'm going to climb a peak up there on Stevens Pass. It's about 1,000-foot elevation gain, I think, maybe 1,500. Nice little snowy peak, the lake on top on the north side of Stevens Pass. That's my plan, at least. Light until 8 o'clock now, at least. So I got about 4 hours to get up there, climb, and work down. I got flashlights, too. That'll involve snowshoes. They're back there. I'd like to maybe make a few observations about our discussion. I framed it as being inside the manosphere with women. And yeah, they are two women. And my takeaway from that I like the fact that women are getting into the red pill space. And I mentioned in there that I believe red pill is synonymous with Manosphere. And that there's these women that are, like I said in the video, they're more intelligent, free thinking, women who've really more adult. They mentioned how these women on the left that are very immature in their, I must dominate, have my way, and be independent, and how the struggle for independence is an immaturity that children go through. I think Jenny has children, so she comes from that perspective. And the more mature level is where we recognize our interdependence. And I think a lot of women are recognizing that feminism has really damaged not only the world, but women. And this is what I say. Women are one of the biggest casualties. Of course, children are the biggest casualty. But women really suffer under feminism. And a lot of women are starting to discover that. And the other thing about the women aspect that I found interesting, especially when we talked about the red pill, is that this is what I find common with women in the red pill now, is that women in the red pill now are basically a late stage. We're in a later stage. And I broke down in the video how we had 30 plus years now of the red pill that I believe started in the 90s with Rush Limbaugh, Michael Savage, Tom Leykis, to name a few big ones. People probably don't, know that Rush Limbaugh he coined the term feminine. That was Rush Limbaugh. And he defined how the feminists are the ones that are really radicalized leftists. And this was, in the early 90s. When, now today we have, the Renee Goods and the modern Karens and problems that we've been having, the Me Too's and so on, and a lot of these women in the red pill, I believe they're responding to these, what Rush called feminine, that have really, their agenda has become the mainstream woke agenda that are now, pushing these ideologies on their kids and all this stuff, that is come to fruit. I described it to Darlene after the interview. We were chatting as we're in the age now of the chickens coming home to roost. And this is what I call the, oh, isn't that beautiful? Sorry. All the, I don't know if I can, move this, but let's see if I can here. This is just looking at all these cows out here, This is the, I'm coming across the Snohomish River Delta area between Snohomish and Monroe. And it's this time of year, it's like, it really turns into this just lush green paradise valley, which it is. It is. So, to show you that, this is why I do this, and I've been here my whole life. I've been a lot of other places. It's hard to beat Washington State. It really is. in spite of the politics, Washington State is one of the most beautiful places on earth. Like I say, the only thing that really beats it is Alaska. And I plan to go there more. Yeah, that's the first time I've seen all the cows out there this year. So the chickens have come home to roost. That's kind of what I call this age now, where we're seeing the fruit of what Rush was talking about, of the feminine. And, those people have been proven right. Over the years, we had this is always the case. John the Baptist, they cut his head off, right? This is what they do to truth tellers. Another guy I like is, Stefan Molyneux. He talks about that a lot. And a lot of, there's been a lot of cancel culture is more recent. You go back to the 90s and there was, another thing I think a lot of people don't know, now that aren't, old enough or whatever, guy named Bill Maher. And you probably know who Bill Maher is. He's still been pretty active and famous on HBO. He has a show called, what's his show called now? This Bill Maher, I don't know why I'm drawing a blank on that. But you go back to the 90s and Bill Maher's first show, it was called Politically Incorrect. And at the same time that Roosh was starting with the feminine, this concept called political incorrectness was coming out. And Bill Maher made the show Politically Incorrect. And he was, in that sense, Bill Maher, he's always been this kind of interesting guy because he's not really left, he's not really right, even though he's turned, hard left in sense, but not totally hard. He kind of goes against the countervailing authority at the time. Yeah, he brought out this idea back then about that suddenly there were things that were fine a week ago that now are politically incorrect. Now we can look back and see the feminine as being, that's this rise of this hysterical sensibility in every aspect of our world that has, made, at first they called it politically incorrect. Later on, it became cancel culture, that same thing. And that was, Bill Maher in the 90s. But I also mentioned Tom Leykis. And neither Jenny or Darlene knew who Tom Leykis was. I told them, you should check out Tom Leykis. Tom Leykis was amazing, phenomena. I know it was mostly centered on the West Coast, but he had plenty of listeners nationwide. And I really think Tom really started, and I was explaining this to Darlene, the red pill, because what Tom had was two things. He had the PUA and the MGTOW up in one. Tom was ahead. He was, one of the real forerunners of that whole thing. And I encourage you guys to listen to some of his shows that you can on YouTube, recordings. They're, Tom, he was a live radio show and everybody had cell phones. That was the beginning of the cell phone deal. And this is smartphone. These were cell phones. They were flip phones, and they some of them didn't even flip. Flip phone was actually an advancement stage in the cell phone development. But people would call in from the road, on their way home from work, afternoon commute. Tom would have Flash Friday, which the girls would, the guys would turn on the headlights on the car. This is before daytime running lights. And the women would see the headlights and flash guys. That was called Flash Friday. It was great times, simpler times where we would actually turn the headlights on so that the girls would turn their headlights on. And, Tom started the, how to get more tail for less money. And a lot of us guys were really intent on, studying this. I found that interesting too. The girls in the interview, they were like confused. And this, you can see this, and I'm not, holding this against them. It's just they have a different point of view. And they were like, why do guys need to learn how to pick up girls? They're like, I get it. We all want to, have sex. But, they didn't understand why that. I can't help but see this as just a general misunderstanding that is natural for women to have of, they don't know what it's like to be a guy, that's not their deal. Cause I can tell you why the guys are trying to, learn how to get laid. And this is critical theology in my book, Monogamish, also, which is that there's been a change in the world where the power shifted to the women, and the women are the primary decision makers. A lot of modern, Evo psych guys today try to say, well, women decide, who has sex and men decide who has I don't think any of that's true. I think we're living in a condition right now that is a condition of technology, and it's not the way it's always been. And so the women didn't used to decide at all who had sex. That was decided by the families and in a thing called arranged marriage. And this is very detailed in my book. In the 1700s, even a little bit before, there was this progression that came with the printing press, which I say is a technology that brought all these changes about. The ideas came from Shakespeare, which was and that was 1500s, but pre-printing press. This idea of romance, this I'm sure this debate had gone on for thousands of years before, but there was this idea that Romeo and Juliet, that the people should be able to get married, because that's the only way people had sex before birth control. That they should get married out of love. What about love, right? And not, what's the best plan, right? But emotion. And that never gained traction. It was an alluring idea. But it never worked in reality until the technology started to be able to support that concept. So that's called the romance revolution. And eventually what you see is these women become generally liberated long before, the right to vote and all this stuff, in these high society groups in Europe and in, Los Angeles, or not Los Angeles. Los Angeles didn't really exist yet. They call it the Gilded Age, which is the Victorian Age. And you can watch that show. It's a great show, The Gilded Age. But this in New York City and the East Coast, they had their high society too. And these women, this was the beginning of the romance novel. And so and this all became about from, the growth of capitalism, the global economy, and the wealth that these people started to have. and that these women were living in these, larger numbers, to where it was they called it high society, socialites. It was a whole thing, and these privileged women were reading these romance novels. That was the beginning. And romance novels are huge, now today going up. But this is the romance revolution. A guy who I appreciate a lot, Paul Elam, he talks about it a lot. We don't, I have a little different take on things than he does, but he's right on with the romance revolution concept, and this has taken over relationships. But I believe that it's the power, bigger kind of power levels being transferred to women, where they had become, through the combination of all these things, women have become the primary deciders of sex and relationship dynamics. To say that men choose relationships, I think is a little oversimplified and off. Women are really choosing guys and pursuing those guys to have relationships. And it's because of this that the guys are trying to learn how do I relate to women? See, guys never were focused on that in the past. And something that came up in the interview was all these modern guys, the guys in the inside the Manosphere, the women were Darlene and Jenny were commenting on how effeminate these guys really are. They're like, Jenny in particular said, I don't see these guys as being masculine men, because I see masculine men as blue collar guys who work, right? And I'm like, yeah, she's right on the money with that. These gym bros that are hanging around, preening, she mentioned that, preening themselves all day. That's not masculinity. That's more like femininity. And dead on, and I was trying to move the conversation along, but another thing that I wanted to mention was the most recent trend has been the Looksmaxing and the clavicular sagas, and that's the first thing that I thought about any of that stuff when I saw that. These guys and this isn't new. It didn't. This was going on in the 80s when I was growing up. There was this thing called the boy bands, and one guy who I thought was really good was I thought he was a great musician, but he turned out to be gay. But what a lot of them did. George Michael and a group called Wham was his first group, and these were like beautiful men, right? and then they were borderline, cross-dresser. There was a group in the 80s called Culture Club, and they were great, and there was their lead guy was a guy named Boy George, and he wore makeup. And so the cross-dressing, the guys wearing makeup, get into the grunge movement. Also, grunge grew out of glam rock, punk, and combination of punk and glam rock. And the early grunge, Mother Love Bone, Andrew Wood, who's really the considered the heart of grunge, died, drug overdose, which is what the Temple of the Dog album was made after. But Andrew Wood, look at some pictures of Andrew Wood. He was another beautiful man, and he wore makeup. So my point is this effeminate, beautiful man concept, as opposed to the rugged Rambo man concept, that's been with us for a while. And I think it's an outgrowth of the modern, high-tech state and the feminization of men over time, as we've gone away from the hard work, hunting, chopping wood, survival, all of that. And then we've got this situation where we can have these men who are maybe not gay, but acting in a feminine role. And these are the role reversals that we've been seeing with the women have been, pushing, feminism has been pushing into the masculine role for the women, working and being independent and not having kids and being able to have sex at random and so these role reversals are kind of the nature of this, and I believe technology is pushing this, and so the viewpoint that the women are coming from in the modern red pill, it's a different viewpoint than and there's modern red pill guys too that I gotta recognize that the guys that are in the movie, all those guys, we got Myron, HS Tiki Talk, Sneeko, Justin. I don't know Justin's last name offhand, but I really liked him. I think he was the most well-grounded one in that of those are the four, I think. I don't think and he interviewed those four in the movie, but he alluded to at the beginning and end, I think the big kind of fish that he couldn't get, that was kind of lurking in the backdrop of the whole thing, is Andrew Tate. And so he got, these kind of Andrew Tate adjacent Manosphere guys. And, my point about that was there's a lot of them that these guys are new too. They're kind of like the women are coming into this with a more recent perspective. And that's one of the things that I hope to, in addition to my textbook that is trying to lay a foundation for what has changed in modern relationships. I take a big picture view. That's my deal. I study history for 10,000 years. And we did talk about that briefly in the show too. Jenny brought up the Eve, and I brought up Adam. But I'm trying to bring in there this big picture concept, and I really believe that if you look at the cover of my book, which I flash, it's all done, I'm in the final editing stages now, but on the cover of my book, you'll see on there, and I'll put it up on here, there's two lines that go up through that. There's a red line on the right and a blue line on the left. What do you think those represent, right? And then there's a dot right there, and they split off like a Y, right? And they split off at that dot like a Y, and they're going infinitely in separate directions. And this is by design. I like to put artistic imagery in things. That's why I use the eclipse is my favorite imagery that is representing the black pill and the white pill, both together as a sort of balance that I think is the long run trajectory of the red pill. We don't want to just stop at red pill rage. Red pill will make you angry. So a lot of these younger people, that's all they got, right? That's all they got is outrage of, everything's fucked, right? And we got no answer to fix it. And a lot of them, like the trad-cons, they think, oh, well, if everybody just gets religious, that'll fix it. All these women will be submissive. Good luck with that. That's why I say those are the guys that are getting wrecked. But my cover shows how in 1960, that's what the book's about. We hit this point where the two sides start going, or men and women went different directions. The bifurcation, and that I say was unleashed. That's why I date it to 1960. Feminism was a long-term process that transferred the power from the men over to the women. But the final technology that really unleashed it completely was birth control. And that was unleashed in the 1960s. And so what a lot of these new red pill men and women, they're just kind of scratching their heads going, boy, the world's really fucked up. What happened? They try to blame it on dating apps and cell phones. That's the most common, go-to. They're only, they're only getting so far. They're new to it, and that's where the red pill rage will take you to. Well, what is it? And what I explain in my book is how it is a full picture. It was unleashed by modern technology in the Industrial Revolution. And that's when I say the chickens are coming home to roost. We're really at this point where we're 300 years in on this Industrial Revolution, and things are starting to get crazy. It's called the singularity. We're there pretty much. We're there. This is the point where the computers become smarter than humans, and they begin to, the computers are rebuilding the computer, or the computers are building the computers instead of the humans building the computers. And the AI outpaces human intelligence. And that's just the technical, side of things. But we're really dealing with a real internal meltdown from the human side of things. From, what I call transhumanism that was unleashed in the 60s, where we're using technology to transcend our human natures. And what we're seeing, all this craziness, is the effects of that. And the effect is that we, are in this new relationship system that is unsustainable. And we did talk about that in the video too. So why do men do PUA? That was the big question that the girls had in the recording. And I say it comes from the fact that women are in control. Women are in power. Women do the choosing. They do the choosing who they're going to have sex with. They also do the choosing who they're going to have a relationship with. Yeah, they need the cooperation of the man to do that, but they generally have the power to get the cooperation of the man. They just might not be able to get every man they want, or the men that would meet all of their standards. Although that's not really any men. That's a misnomer too. You hear that a lot about, it's only 1% of men who meet the 3/6s or who meet these standards that women are asking for nowadays. As if, this is why I say it's not true. You're supposing that there is a small group that meet that standard, right? And what I'm putting forth in my book, Monogamish, is that there is no group that meets the standard. There is no man that meets the standard long term. Over any considerable period of time, everybody in every relationship will get wrecked in the modern system. Tom Brady, case A. This is the one we like to talk about the most, but there are many, many, many others. But Tom Brady's really the ultimate Chad, and he was, the Huckleberry until he wasn't. And then she left him for a lower status man. A lower status. This is not unusual at all. It doesn't matter what your status is. And this is in my steps, that step number 12, the final of the exit phase, that she will leave you and get with the guy who does the opposite. This is the pattern. It's like, I didn't just, randomly make these steps up as some kind of design that I wanted to. This isn't what I want. This isn't what anybody wants. This is what the system is currently operating on. This is the facts on the ground. This is the evidence of not what the stated values are of people. It's not what they say, it's what they do. It's studying, and this is what the Manosphere does. This is why the Manosphere is a threat, because the Manosphere is the truth. The red pill is the truth. Why do I say, that's not an opinion? That's what it is by nature. That's the whole purpose of it. The purpose of it is to take the lies that we've been fed, and you see that with the girls in the video discussing, that how they kind of became to, their red pill moments, realizing that, they weren't being told the whole truth. And so you start to uncover what the truth is. It's a fact-finding mission, and the truth is the facts. It's what's actually happening on the ground. The facts on the ground. What is the preponderance of evidence? Not what people say, not what we want to believe, like Mueller in X-Files. It's not that we want to believe, it's what actually is. What is happening, really? That's what the red pill is. That's what the Manosphere is. This is what men excel at, because men operate on logic and reason, devoid of emotions, right? And they call that narcissistic. It's not narcissistic. It's called stoicism, and it's a normal, healthy thought process that men excel at. And this is why the Manosphere is the sphere, not the sphere in Vegas, not that sphere. My friend, who I will not name, is one of the main guys behind that. Super cool thing. You guys should all go there and check it out. But not that sphere. No, the sphere of the men who are trying to figure out, like men have always done throughout history, what the truth is. The truth tellers, who also happen to, piss a lot of people off in the process because they can't handle the truth. And there's the blue pill world is the world of denial. So the reason why men learn these strategies is because they have to. And this is something that women don't generally understand. It's hard for a woman to understand how there's a large majority of men who aren't getting any. They haven't got any for a long time, if ever. This is why they're so easily manipulated too. All it takes is a little bit, for a lot of them, and they'll do anything, right? That's why this persists, this power imbalance, why it persists, why and then we say, oh, they're the Simps. Well, you know, you go hungry, you starve a guy for long enough time, you know, and he's willing to pay just about anything. And women understand this, right? But they don't really it's not their experience. Okay, their experience is that even the unattractive women can get laid any day of the week. They might not get the relationships they want, but sex isn't a thing. And it's not, sex isn't a thing for women anyways. Women have significantly less testosterone than men. And testosterone is what makes the male drive. This is what makes men have the need for sex is a necessity. It's not a optional thing. Men, young men, imagine, see, women don't know this, but imagine being a young man with this, you know, 1,000 level testosterone going through you. You know what that does? I mean, this is no joke. Guys will dig a hole in the ground and it. This, you think that's crazy, but it is what it is, you know? And women know this, right? They just don't know what it's like to be in that predicament. Now imagine that is your system running you. And men, another thing that women don't know, well, they do, but they don't, about men is that we only have enough blood to run one head at a time. Only enough blood to either this head is thinking or the other head is doing the thinking. And when you're, you know, in that bind, you know, it's a strong biological drive. And these guys, they got to find a solution to this, right? And so there's a market. And this is the whole PUA thing. And of course, women don't understand this. You know, why is it so complicated? Women are friendly. Why don't you just talk to them, you know? And women, another thing that I've observed is that each individual woman, she thinks that there's another woman who will have sex with that guy, right? Okay, maybe I won't, right? But there's a whole bunch, all these other, somebody will have sex with that guy, right? And that's just not true. You know, she's wrong. That's not actually the situation. And this is what the guys are, you know, talking about in the Manosphere is that there's a large number of men and they're not getting any. They're just not getting any. Let's take another, show you guys the Highway 2. We're coming up to Index. And man, I mean, there's views. What it is there's the Mount Index, and it peaks out here, and you see it. You get these little glimpses, and it's just gorgeous. You know, it's all covered with snow right now, fresh snow. And there's a bunch of them, actually. They kind of peek out through the trees, and you don't see them all the time, because Washington State, you're buried in the trees a lot of the times. You know, because the trees are so big. They're like 200 feet tall. Yeah, I thought maybe I could show you guys, but we'll get some footage of it eventually. So you got a little glimpse of it. Put this back. Trying to figure out how to do this filming here in the car. I want to shout out to one of my big inspirations. You know, totally different type of content than what I do, but I bet you guys would like it. His name is Timmy, and it's called Truck House Life. And I just love that guy. He's really a guy after my own heart, also from Alaska. And, you know, he does a lot of, you know, driving travel videos with his truck house in Alaska and around the United States. And yeah, I really like that. I'd like to, you know, have a little bit of those elements in my videos. That's why I've been doing it this way lately. and he's a big inspiration for me. And yeah, shout out to Timmy. So guys are learning attraction strategies because they have to, and you know, and the rub on this part that I am, you know, telling guys and be reticent about now is, you know, you can, and I was there where they're like, it's like the first level is that you just want to be able to get with women, right? And then you get in a relationship. They'll convert it to a relationship, and you're in one, a monogamish relationship. You go through this cycle and you get wrecked, right? And this is kind of later stage, you know. This is what the older guys learn. All the guys inside the Manosphere, those are all like the young guys, you know, that are early on. They might not have gotten wrecked yet. They're just trying to get wrecked. Unfortunately, they don't think it'll happen to them, right? But they don't know, you know. You don't know what you don't know, and they don't know that that's why I'm trying to teach with my book, you know, what the long-term progression is. But the next phase of all this is that you get wrecked through the cycle, and she exits and she replaces you with the guy who does the opposite, right? In Tom Brady's case, it was the personal trainer who was, you know, you just kind of look into it as, you know, just look at how is this happening, right? What is he doing that's opposite? And you'll find it. I'm telling you, you'll find it. It's there. And so Giselle's complaint against Tom Brady was that he wouldn't quit his job. He wouldn't spend more. She wanted more time. How convenient too, you know, like, I don't fully buy that. But it's a very slick out, you know, knowing that he's not going to be able to quit his job and all this stuff, you know. She sets this trap of, oh, well, you don't spend enough time with me, you know, so therefore I have to cheat on you with the pool boy. Well, what does he do that Tom doesn't do? He spends time with her. Tom doesn't spend time, he spends. You'll find this every time if you look. It's what I say it stems from is just entitlement. You know, there's this, I find the guy, I get with the guy who has everything that I want, right? And then eventually I'm not happy with that, right? And real life comes in, and it's hard, and it's not fun anymore. And then the next guy comes along who, you know, can satisfy that need for more attention. That's whatever is missing. Here's a nice little spot. We're actually in the town of Bering, which is not much. You know, there's only a few houses here, but there's Bering, which is a huge double peak, and it looks totally different from here. That's the fireplace that got burned out there, what the? Did it stop? God damn it! Why did it stop? No, it didn't stop. I don't know what happened there. Yeah, there's where it got burned the last couple years. You can see the maples there starting to get some green on them. Spring is coming out here. It's slower in the mountains, but yeah, there's some power lines and stuff here. But I've climbed that. I've climbed most of these peaks out here in my life. I love mountaineering. I'm an old experienced mountaineer. Hopefully, I won't do anything stupid and get myself killed in the mountains. There's a million ways to die. I've experienced a few of them already. And one thing that I've observed, and you kind of need to be smart to survive, but long term, that might not be enough either. But but I try to be smart. And I've seen a lot of people die in the mountains, just hiking or whatever. Guy goes out, they never see him again, kind of thing. Well, a lot of those guys, what you'll hear is that, but he was experienced, right? He was a really experienced guy, and you'll see that with avalanches. Guys get buried in ski avalanches, but he knew what he was doing. He was an experienced guy. And I always hear that, and I take note. I'm like, yeah, damn. That's how. And that's always like, I have all these kind of big questions that are always hanging out there. That's one of them. Is well, how do these experienced guys end up, getting killed? See it on motorcycles and stuff too. And I think there's a lot of different possible answers. One of them is that the guy is just his number came up, experience means that you're out there a lot. You've been out, you have a high count of numbers. One of those is going to get you. My old friend Zachary used to call it the red X. Sooner or later, one of those is going to have a red X on it. And the other possibility is that guys get kind of complete experience. Familiarity breeds complacency, and so they think that they've got this, right? I think there's a lot of that too. So yeah, I try to not do that. Don't be thinking that I've got this dick. Every time that I'm doing something like being out in the mountains is another time when shit could go wrong. Could go very wrong. And one of the things that experience teaches you is that you've seen things go wrong, and so you kind of know what to look for. But don't assume that you always do. Life is very dangerous, and there's a lot of inherent hazards. And my content, back to what we're talking about, is that now we have a new hazard that we didn't used to have so much of in the past. People in the old days, I've talked about this with my friend Will a lot, they did not have to worry about their relationship going sideways. That wasn't they had to worry about their wife, getting killed or injured or, disease and all. There was a lot of things to worry about, but that wasn't one of them. But now today, this is, we don't have a lot of these external threats that we used to have of, a tree falling on us, while we're trying to log or getting eaten by an animal or a million other things, that we live in these relative safety, but we have new threats. And I brought this up in the video, the number one threat that is the number one killer of men under 50 that are not dying of natural deaths, which I would even question maybe under 60, but it's called deaths of despair, and these are the deaths from the loneliness epidemic itself. And I found the girls also were kind of having a little bit of a struggle understanding that one too. and I get it, it doesn't affect women the same way. Although I do believe that women are increasingly being affected more and more, adversely as the loneliness epidemic becomes more total and complete and hitting us all. But men are the ones that are, self-offing and dying by means of vice also with addictions and it's that testosterone. Another big question looming out there: why do men die younger than women? And one of my big answers for that is just the testosterone. We got just add that. We have much higher risk levels, going on throughout our life that women just aren't doing. And it's hard for them to understand because that's not their experience. But deaths of despair are predominantly a male thing. Like 70% are men. And this is the largest group of death outside of natural causes. More so than accidents, all that stuff, this is what men are facing. And that's why I'm here for. I'm here to bring you through the other side to the white pill. Out of the red pill, through the black pill is a necessary stage. That is a difficult stage. But the other side of that is recognizing that it's not your fault. This is happening to all of us. And you're not alone. And we're here for you. There's people that are here for you. And I'm trying to put that together. I want men in particular, but also women. That's why I love Darlene in the video. She's grappled with the whole issue of being childless and single at older age. This is the future. And so we can not fix it necessarily. We can't, it's got to run its course. I believe that's what we're experiencing. May you live in interesting times. We do. But we can have faith through this. And we can not only survive, but we can thrive. There's a lot of benefits and pluses to this world that we're in now. It is what it is. And, I hope that you can start to see that and start to get through. Jenny brought it up. She kind of brought up how she went through this rabbit hole of stages, to get to the final stage. And that's the white pill. The white pill is the final stage. That's where you understand and you realize that it is a spiritual situation that we're dealing with. It is spiritual in nature. And the answer is spiritual. And that is that we put our trust not in the world. That is the idol. That is making idols out of this life. Jesus said that in order to have life, and he meant eternal life, you have to give up your life. And what he meant by that was this world. You have to surrender it. That is the black pill into the white pill. It's surrendering into, okay, this is what it is. I'm going to let it be and trust that God's got a higher plan. And I'll leave you with that thought. May God bless you, and I'll see you soon.